So 9,000 years of drinking history. What has changed?
Cocktails are in an elevated state that they haven't been in since probably the start of Prohibition in 1920.
You're seeing so many great menus of really wildly concocted, beautiful cocktails.
Yeah, there's been no time in human history where there hasn't been some sort of restriction on who's producing, consuming, and distributing alcohol.
Each financial decision is not in a silo by itself. It has to be looked at and how it relates to something else in your plan. And most people are not looking at the big picture.
This is John Smallwood, and we are back on the Money Isn't podcast. And money isn't the mission, but it's the outcomes that we're all searching for, okay? And I have a very special guest with me today. We're going to be diving deep into something that I think is really important, and it's pursuing lifestyle. It's pursuing the enjoyment of the finer things in life. And today, Diana Pittet is joining me. She's the co-founder of Night Owl Hospitality. And you are the co-founder of the
Asbury Park Whiskey Club.
And you're the president of the United States Bartenders Guild, the Central New Jersey chapter.
Correct.
And you are the events coordinator for Surfrider Foundation, the Jersey Shore chapter.
That's right, too.
And you are a cheesemonger.
Well, a former cheesemonger, but probably once a cheesemonger, always a cheesemonger.
Sort of like one of those things, like once it's in you, you can't get it out.
Yeah, I'm also a former Latin teacher, and I think people can, when they see me, they're like, oh, I bet she was a teacher at some point. Like once it's in you, it's very hard to shake it.
I can't even imagine teaching Latin. That's a whole different perspective. But one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, like I've known you for 15 to 20 years.
Right.
And what always struck me is you were always on a journey of traveling and discovering and really searching the world. And in that search, you found so many different passions like surfing. I mean, how many places have you been around the world where you've actually surfed?
Oh, goodness. I feel like probably at least 20 places.
At least 20. And
yeah.
These are not, like going to the Jersey Shore 20 times. I mean, you've been to the Jersey Shore a lot because you're there.
I live there.
But like, you've been, what are the top 3 most exotic places that you've surfed?
Sri Lanka, El Salvador, and Brazil.
And you spent like a month in each of those places, right?
Correct.
So you really, not only did you, enjoy the surfing but you got to know the locals and the local customs and the local places to go have a cocktail and to go have a drink.
As much as you can in a month. But for me, traveling is also not only just having fun, like surfing, but also getting to know a place. And so as much as possible, getting to know not only its food and drink, but also its history, its art and architecture. And just being there for a week of surfing won't give me that comprehensive view of a place.
No, but a month will start to frame it.
Yeah.
And really get it there. I think one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is you're actually doing an event for us coming up in May.
Right.
And Night Owl Hospitality is doing the event, and it's a curated cocktail. This one's going to be around the concept of Cinco de Mayo. So you're going to be doing a really special margarita for us, I believe, right? Or even better than a margarita.
Right now I have the idea of doing 3 different tequila drinks because of Cinco de Mayo, and also folks in New Jersey love their tequila.
We do love our tequila.
And whenever I'm teaching about cocktails, and that's part of what Night Owl Hospitality does, is not only making cocktails for an event, but also showing people how to make cocktails, which will be an element of our event on May 15th. I like to show the 3 different ways of making a cocktail, the 3 chief methods of making a cocktail. So there's shaken cocktails, stirred cocktails, and built in a glass cocktails. So I'll be doing 3 different tequila drinks showing those different techniques.
Built in a glass as opposed to shaken, stirred, and then poured into.
Right. So then you don't have an external vessel for making your drink. You actually just pour everything into a glass and stir it. So most highballs are that way. So you think about rum and cokes, gin and tonics, vodka clubs. You just pour it into a glass with some ice, give it a stir. And they generally are drinks that have something bubbly usually maybe a bit sweet, and then the spirit, and then that's it. You don't need to do anything else with it.
How do people find the Night Owl Hospitality Group?
That you can find on Instagram or our website.
Which is nightowlhospitality.com?
Yeah.
And then the Whiskey Club, this thing's been in Asbury for 9 years.
Right.
And you have over 300 subscribers that actually the last Tuesday of every month?
Yeah, so for the last Tuesday of every month, for the last 9 years, during the pandemic, we did go online. We've been meeting at different locations in Asbury Park.
From houses to special
Bookshops,
venues,
to art galleries, to restaurants, just all different types of places. And our tagline for the Whiskey Club is that we're just as much about creating community as we are about drinking whiskey, though we are definitely drinking whiskey. So not only is it an opportunity for folks to meet one another, people in Asbury, but also to get to know different venues in Asbury Park. Because you would think, since Asbury's so small, everybody would know every business, but actually there's always surprises for folks.
And like if you have the opportunity to go into somebody's private home and then experience their home or whatever it is, you're getting a different view.
Always,
and,
like, who doesn't want to go to somebody's home?
Yeah. No, it's
invited, by the way.
Invited. Yeah, exactly. But I think what I wanted to do today is, alcohol and tequila and whiskey and all these different things people have so much enjoyment from them. And people become very, very interested in it. And it's like the exploration, like you going back into, your NYU days, right? Back in the day when you were actually teaching. What were you teaching at NYU?
I also, not only did I work at NYU from 2001 to 2008 on the Academic Journal, but then I also went back from 2017 to 2023 teaching a graduate seminar
on
the history, culture, and politics of drinking, looking at 9,000 years of drinking history.
So 9,000 years of drinking history. What has changed?
That's so funny. Well, in some ways, things haven't changed. That for as long as humans have been intentionally consuming alcohol, which is at least 9,000 years, probably longer than that, humans have had a up and down again relationship with alcohol. It's always been
up and down.
Meaning, it's like a relationship. Like sometimes you've been up in a relationship, and sometimes you want to quit that relationship, and you can't figure out where you're going to be. Should I stay or should I go?
Very true.
And there's been no time in human history where there hasn't been some sort of restriction on who's producing, consuming, and distributing alcohol. And it could be age related. It could be what gender you are. It could be your economic class.
Prohibition back in the day.
Right. So that wasn't even that long ago. That was only about 100 years ago. But I'm talking about, thousands of years ago.
And how important is the local, bar, the local speakeasy in this 9,000 years? Like, when did that start? When did you start to go out to a place?
Oh, I'm trying to think. I mean, alcohol would normally be probably from the get-go somewhere that you would go external from your home too, because alcohol, they think at the beginning probably had a sacred aspect to it. So you would be going to a sacred space to have alcohol, or alcohol would actually make it a sacred space.
Interesting.
But when it started becoming a place where you would go to socialize, where there's taverns, can't really say, but at least since Greek times, probably the Phoenicians as well had places to go drink wine. Thousands of years, at least 2,000 years.
Yeah. And when you were in Rome doing was it your thesis that you were doing?
I studied abroad in Rome my junior year of college, or a semester of my junior year of college. And it was for classicists, so those studying the Greco-Roman world. And the program specifically was looking at Roman topography, so looking at Roman archaeology and history. And each one of us had to do a site report. which means that when we visited an archaeological site, one of us was in charge of giving some extra dimension, historical dimension about the site. And I chose the one in Ostia Antica, which was the harbor town for Rome. And I did a site report on one of the old taverns there.
And how old was that tavern at that time?
Well, goodness, now you're asking me to remember something from
30 years ago.
Yeah, 30 years ago. But I mean, it was
Instant recall. Boom.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been almost 2,000 years
I was
old.
just saying, yeah, it has to be, right?
And the tavern served a purpose that's not all that different from today, because there was pretty dense housing in Ostia called insulae, which is the Latin word for an apartment complex.
Right.
And just like in New York City, people don't have big kitchens usually. And so you go out, you don't do a lot of entertaining at home.
You would meet out.
You eat out, or you go meet somebody for a drink. You don't necessarily have somebody over. And so too in Ostia is that folks would be living in tight, cramped quarters. So you would go out to eat or go out. I mean, probably I would have wine with your food anyway, but it wouldn't be something necessarily wine wouldn't be necessarily something separate from eating.
Interesting.
It'd be part and parcel.
Interesting. So we're recording this, and today that we're recording it, March 27th, is
International Whiskey Day.
And coming up on May
17th, the third Saturday of May, is Global Whiskey Day,
which is amazing. So let's jump into so many people. They're interested in tequila. They're interested in Scotch. They're interested in bourbon. They're interested in whiskey. Let's stay on the whiskey bourbon side.
Okay.
Just give us the background of this. And why is it so, it's such a beautifully curated thing now. It's become elegant.
Yeah. And it's, what's fascinating to me about alcohol is that whatever context you're putting it into shapes what it is. So whiskey can also be thought of as something kind of rough that unrefined folks had. And, what I'm thinking of right now is that eggnog, which is classic for the holidays, the winter holidays. It used to be made, so we're talking the early 1800s, it would have been made with rum or with brandy, cognac. And if it was made with bourbon, it was considered something sort of like country and rough. And now bourbon is in this context of a celebration of great American food products.
Yeah.
We also have to remember that anything, I call it a food product, but we have to remember anything that's alcoholic is an agricultural product.
Correct.
We think of it sort of distinct from it, but it all comes from something that is grown in nature.
So simply, Scotch is from Scotland?
Yeah. Do you want me to give my little thing on whiskey?
Yeah.
Yeah. And even though I have a whiskey club where folks are regulars, and I say this maybe every other month, I always need to do a refresher because, it's not totally ingrained in us. But this is the international sign for a category. So this is the category of whiskey. And off of whiskey are different branches. So there's Scotch, there's American whiskey, which is bourbon and rye, and some other ones. There's Irish whiskey, Japanese whiskey. And do you know what unites all whiskeys?
No.
What unites all whiskeys is that it's grain, that all whiskeys will originate from a fermented grain. So one way you can think about whiskey is it's distilled beer. So and the main...
Interesting. Distilled beer. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And for instance, brandy is usually distilled wine or some other, or distilled cider, some sort of...
Just for me.
Yeah.
Describe the process of distilling, taking wine and distilling it into brandy. What is that process?
It's a technical process, which I don't want to bore everybody with, but the easiest way you can think about it is distilling is concentrating the alcohol. And the way you concentrate alcohol is you take the water out. And the way distilling works is that you heat up your fermented products. So whatever is fermented is already going to have alcohol in it.
Right.
So wine or beer. Beer, the percentage of alcohol is somewhere from 3 to 8%.
Depending on IPA or whatever, yeah.
And again, when you're making whiskey, I say you're distilling a beer, but it's not beer that you would drink. It's not hopped or anything like that. It's grain that's been fermented into alcohol. So you take your beer or your wine, which already has alcohol in it, and let's just stay with beer because we're going to talk about whiskey. And so the alcohol content, let's say it's like, I don't know, it could be some like 8% alcohol by volume. And we now want to get a much more alcoholic product. So we want to get the water out of there. And the way you do that is you heat up the beer, so to speak. And again, it's just a loose term, but you heat up the beer and in an enclosed container in the still. And what happens is that water and alcohol have different boiling points. And alcohol is more volatile. And so it goes into steam at a lower temperature than water. So you heat up the beer, and we know water boils at 100 degrees Celsius or 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Alcohol starts boiling off at a lower point. So it's heated up, and the alcoholic vapor rises up, just like, if you picture a pot of water boiling, you see all the steam coming up, right? This is an enclosed container. So the alcoholic vapor is coming off like steam, and it's in this big, in a still, a big pot, and it has a big arm, a closed arm that goes up, and then the steam, the alcoholic vapor sort of travels across this big arm and then goes down, and there's water that cools the steam. So now it's going to go back into liquid, but most of the water stays behind because the temperature hasn't been hot enough for the water to go over.
Oh, that's interesting.
So you're capturing.
So you're really separating the two from each other. That's really the process. That's interesting. Like you always see like the distillery, and you're like, okay, and I've been to them, and maybe I drank too much while we were there, but not really remembering what how it is. So we have these distinct branches that have all come off, and grain becomes the central component
of whiskey. Yeah.
And is there different, obviously there's different grains being used around the world in the different versions. Like what makes whiskey compared to, Scotch?
Well, Scotch is a whiskey.
Correct.
Yeah. So whiskey is the umbrella category off of which is Scotch. And what makes Scotch is it's from Scotland. And there are different, I talked about the umbrella category, and then we have Scotch, and then there's branches off of Scotch. And there's sort of four main types of Scotch. We have single malt Scotch, blended Scotch, blended malt Scotch, and then also single grain Scotch as well. And the main grains single malt, which you're probably familiar with. I actually have a single malt here in front of me.
Which one is that?
This is Bruichladdich, which is from Islay, which is one of the Western Islands in Scotland. And Islay is famous for its really peaty, smoky whiskey. So that's where Lafroig is from, Lagavulin, Ardbeg, Bowmore. Bruichladdich was a distillery that opened in the late 1800s and went kind of defunct in the 1990s and was resurrected in 2001. And it's considered one of the more sort of experimental, cutting edge whiskey, Scotch distilleries, where they are still very much bound to tradition, but are happy to try new things. And this bottle actually expresses that, where usually Scotch is aged in ex-bourbon barrels, so from the United States, or sherry barrels. And this one has been aged in a Sauterne cask. And they wanted to sort of see what would happen to the Scotch if it was aged in a non-traditional barrel. So again, the traditional barrel would be an ex-bourbon barrel from the States or a sherry cask from Spain.
And so does this have a completely different, unique flavor than something that's aged in the bourbon barrel?
It will pick up different flavors. When a whiskey ages in a wooden barrel, something like 60 to 70% of its flavor comes from the interaction of the whiskey with the barrel.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So a lot of that just is from the wood. But if that wood if that barrel has held something previously, like bourbon or sherry or Sauterne wine in this case, it will also pull some of the flavors of the product that was originally in that barrel. Out of the barrel.
Interesting. So when you're, what makes a bourbon? A bourbon, and what makes a bourbon, more enticing or more valuable than the next bourbon? Like there's like so many different layers now.
Right. Well, I feel like I should go back to this single malt, because I didn't answer your question about the single malt. So what makes a single malt is the single means it comes from a single distillery in Scotland during a single harvest season, distilling season. And the malt part means it's 100% malted barley. So getting back to what whiskey is, that all whiskeys come from a grain, a fermented grain. And in the case of single malts, the grain in question is malted barley.
Okay.
And then a blended Scotch, which is by far the biggest category of Scotch. So that's Dewar's, that's Johnny Walker, that's Chivas. That will be a combination of a malt, so barley, and a grain whiskey, so usually corn. And it's usually cheaper because the corn whiskey just ends up being a cheaper component. So a blended Scotch maybe has something like 20 to 30% of its content comes from malted barley, and then from a pot still. And then the remaining part is a grain whiskey from a column still, which is a different type of still. Again, that both stills, their chief purpose is to separate water from the alcohol, to concentrate the alcohol. But they end up with different flavor profiles. A pot still ends up with much more complex, robust flavors, and a column still less complex flavors because you're getting more just concentrated alcohol without all the other sort of flavors for the base material.
So when you're discovering and you're tasting, what do you see people gravitating towards today? Is it, from the 4 different styles?
Oh, from the 4 different styles of Scotch?
Yeah.
Well, single malt. The world drinks blended Scotch. That's
the mass-produced stuff.
It's a little bit more mass-produced, but not to say that it doesn't have quality to it. And that's what most people are familiar with Scotch. It's only been in the last 30, 40 years that single malt has really become something
special. So what are the top brands that people are searching out at this moment?
Oh,
not that we're promoting any of them.
No. Well, then let's just talk about style then, maybe, instead of talking about particular brands. I don't really know the market research on it, but I would say that what people are looking for in Scotch, well, usually people, when they get into single malt Scotch. So again, Scotch is a type of whiskey, and then Scotch has different branches of it, or different types of Scotch. So when folks are into single malts, they like to explore the different regional variations of single malts. And some folks really gravitate to the Speyside, the ones that are distilled in Speyside, which tend to be sort of more floral and delicate and smooth. And a classic one being Macallan is from Speyside. Okay. A lot of the Glens are from Speyside. And then there's some folks who love the smoky, peaty ones from Islay, which sometimes tastes like you're licking an ashtray. And it's like
good to smoke a cigar with them.
Yes, yeah, they can be very complimentary. But then sometimes it can be too much. Like maybe with a cigar that's already smoky, maybe you want to go with a sort of a bold but easier, less smoky one from Speyside, so that you have complementary flavors. But sometimes you might want to go big and just do smoky and smoky. So have a smoky Scotch with a smoky cigar. And there's no right or wrong pairings. That's one of the key things I try to teach when I'm doing, for instance, doing pairings with cheese and some sort of alcoholic beverage. Right? There's no right or wrong pairings. It's what you like. But one of the guiding principles is when you're trying to pair things, you want them to be complementary. Is it actually looking for opposites? So a classic example of opposites is chocolate-covered pretzels, right? You have salty and sweet. So sometimes you want 2 opposites that end up being complementary.
Sounds
or
good.
You want like and like, like smoky, smoky. Or you oftentimes, a good way to approach pairings is that what grows together goes together. So look at geographical connections to places that.
Yeah. So you're seeing, and I just wanted to go off on a tangent for a second. People are buying, in essence, smokers. They have them at their house, like these.
Oh yes, yeah.
What is that? What is that doing, and how is that enhancing the flavor? Even seeing restaurants bring it out, and it's under a little glass, and it's smoking.
Yeah. Well, when people smoke whiskeys, there's actually a great place in Asbury Park that does it. I don't know if I can do shout outs. Lola's, Lola's European Cafe, which is often hosts Whiskey Club. So thank you, Scott, for hosting us. They do it. I think there's sort of two things going on with it. One, it's really kind of fun presentation,
it's a beautiful
right?
presentation.
You know,
It's like,
it's
what
like,
is that?
It's
What
like
is that?
sure
Yeah.
makes a Friday night feel special, or even a Tuesday night feel special when you've got a glass with smoke coming out of it. And two, I mean, smoke, it's a flavor that we humans like, right? Well, smoke has been used chiefly as a way to preserve products. What's interesting is that we, in many ways, don't need to preserve foods anymore because we have refrigeration.
Right.
But before there was refrigeration and we wanted foods to last through the winter or last through lean times, you need to figure out a way to preserve it. And classic ways of doing that was salt and with fermentation, so pickling, or smoking. And we just like that flavor. Like, for instance, we don't need bacon anymore because bacon was a way to cure pork so that you could have it for a long time or for a voyage. So we don't need bacon anymore, but who doesn't want that smoky flavor of bacon, right?
Yeah. Between the pretzels and the bacon right now, I'm like, really, I'm hungry.
So, I mean, people like it. And then when I was talking about the different styles of single malts that people gravitate to, and the styles of single malt are somewhat geographically determined, some people love that smoke. And I liken it to if you've gotten used to adding hot sauce to your food, right?
Yeah.
And you like dunk, 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 add a lot of, that's me using a shaker bottle of hot sauce. You add it to your food and you're like, ooh, this is what I like. And if you taste something without the hot sauce,
You're like, it's
when
bland.
you're it's bland to you.
Yeah.
And so too I feel with some whiskeys is that if it's missing that smoky, like hit you over the head element, then you're like, I don't know, this tastes like kind of like weak to me or is not very interesting.
Interesting.
And not to say that all smoky, peaty whiskeys are hit you over the head. Oftentimes that smokiness is beautifully integrated into the whiskey. But if you're if you define whiskey by Scotch by that smokiness, it's going to feel empty to you if you don't have that in there.
What is the way, I mean, you hear there's different versions of serving it. Like when you're serving it, what are your preferred ways? Is it, on the rocks? Is it, like this, what are the different options that you?
For the whole category of whiskey, or do we want to talk just about Scotch?
I don't know.
Okay, well, that's up to me. Well, I say drink it the way you like to drink it. Some people get very dogmatic about the way to drink whiskey.
Yes.
Some people think it's a crime to add water or ice to your whiskey. And my thought is, do what feels good and tastes good.
It's extremely warm when you drink it without any ice.
Yeah. I mean, at Whiskey Club, maybe I'll just keep it specific to Whiskey Club. And at Whiskey Club, we try a variety of whiskeys. So we try a single malt, not necessarily a one from Scotland, because even America makes single malts. Japan is, of course, famous for its single malts these days. So we will usually have a single malt. We'll usually have an American craft expression and maybe an American big brand expression. And we try them all at room temperature in these Glencairns, which are glasses made in Scotland, which a tulip-shaped glass, which is sort of designed for enjoying whiskey, where you have the base and then all the flavor. It's like the nose gets really concentrated at the narrower top.
So as you're drinking, it's all coming up to your nose.
Yeah. And we try it all room temperature. And then we often will encourage adding a little bit of water. And why would you do that? Well, it's something chemicals going on that a lot of the flavor molecules are bound up in the alcohol molecule. And when you add water, it breaks the suspension, and a lot of different flavors are then released from this bond with the alcohol. And actually, you're not necessarily diluting or weakening the flavor sensation. In fact, you'll often get additional flavors coming out when you add a little bit of water.
Interesting.
And in the case of the single malt Scotch I have here, it's 58.4% alcohol by volume. Usually most whiskeys are about 40% alcohol by volume.
That's pretty high.
So this is high. So you actually do want to add water to it because it's pretty concentrated. And that's also one of the reasons, too, if you're buying whiskeys and you see something that's a high alcohol by volume, it's expensive because there's more alcohol in there than water. And that also allows you then to get more volume out of your bottle. So this is a 700 milliliter, but I'll be adding water to it. So in essence, I'm maybe going to end up buying a 750 milliliter bottle. I'm paying for a concentrated version of the 700. It's like buying a concentrate in a way, like you're buying concentrate, and then you get to add water, which then actually lengthens the experience of it.
Are there like cocktails, mixed cocktails with bourbon at this moment that are really popular out there?
Oh yeah. Classic. Of course, old fashions, Manhattans, whiskey sours, paper plane, which is a modern classic. Yeah, bourbon.
I don't know I don't know
the paper plane.
Yeah. How is that mixed?
Paper plane is what's referred to as a modern classic. So the other cocktails I just mentioned are classics, the Manhattan, the old fashioned, the whiskey sour. Those are cocktails that were developed before Prohibition by the late 1800s. And a modern classic is a cocktail that's been created in the last 20 years, because right now we're in the midst of a cocktail renaissance.
Yeah, we really are.
And cocktails that were created during this time that are still around, that have traveled around the world. So you see them on menus all around the world. So much so that they seem like they date from pre-Prohibition times, but they're actually only like 15 years old.
Like, is that the paper plane?
And the paper plane. So the paper plane is an example of that. And the paper plane was created, I think, 2010.
Oh, wow.
And it was based on a 1910 cocktail called The Last Word.
Okay.
And the last word is equal parts gin, lime juice, maraschino liqueur, and green chartreuse.
Okay.
And you can think of cocktail creation as playing Mr. Potato, Mr. Potato Head. And it's not an analogy I came up with. I'm stealing this, where you can just like swap things out.
Yeah.
So you have this cocktail, the last word, that has 4 equal parts. And then you plug things out and put something else in. So for the paper plane, instead of gin, you put in bourbon.
Okay.
Instead of lime juice, you have lemon juice. And instead of maraschino liqueur, you have Aperol.
Oh, nice.
And instead of green chartreuse, you have an Italian Amaro.
Oh, wow.
And
that actually sounds really good.
It's really good. And so it's, people love it.
I've never had one. We're going to have one.
Yeah. And, the thing is because it's a modern classic, if you go to a bar in Asbury Park and have a paper plane, they're like, oh, yeah, I can make that for you.
But if you go somewhere else, they may not be able to.
Yeah, it might not be able to. But
my wife went into a local bar here, and she ordered a Cosmo. And the bartender said to her, look around. Look where you are. We don't do that here. It was really funny.
Oh, somebody was yucking her yum.
Yeah, but it was like a pitcher place,
Okay.
like a pitcher of beer. Like,
got it. All right. Well, that's true.
Like you're not in that place, but like the cocktail, and this is really what I wanted to, now that we're here.
Yeah.
It's the cocktail that is really an elevated experience now. You're seeing so many great, menus of really wildly concocted, beautiful cocktails.
Yeah.
But it's like I was just out in Telluride, and we were skiing, and there was this really cool speakeasy that they created, downstairs below a place. And they had really interesting cocktails, but they were like putting, egg whites in them and things like that are really give it the texture. And it's really it's become much bigger than it's ever been. I don't remember this 20 years ago. You had your traditional stuff. Yeah.
This is an exciting time to drink whatever your beverage of choice is. That if you're a beer drinker, wherever you are, there's going to be some craft breweries. Just think about where we are here in New Jersey. So many amazing craft breweries. If you're into wine, there's expertly made wines from all around the world at all different price points. Great spirits, as well, and then great cocktails. And if you don't drink as well, we're really in an amazing time too of people understanding all the different reasons why people aren't drinking or drinking less. And there's also amazing non-alcoholic products.
Yeah, mocktail list. We were at, they had literally 15 mocktails.
Yeah,
which
and
I was shocked at.
Yeah, and you can even get bottled mocktails now. One of my favorites is called the Phony Negroni, which is a non-alcoholic Negroni. It's just an extraordinary time that we're in. And so actually, in many ways, I'm so glad you brought me onto the show because I feel like I can't emphasize this enough. This is an amazing time to be drinking if you do drink and don't drink. And one of the great markers of that is this cocktail renaissance we're in, where cocktails are at an elevated state that they haven't been in since probably the start of Prohibition in 1920. And the cocktail, which I don't know if many people know, is an American culinary creation.
Oh, it is. I didn't know that.
Yep. And Prohibition killed it. And Prohibition was repealed in December 1933. And it took us, I won't do the math, but it took us like almost 70 years to get
back to creation of cocktails. Because people were just drank. Like they lost their like it was different.
Yeah, a few things happened. Prohibition lasted for almost 14 years.
Was it that long? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, from 1920 to 1933, which people say is 13 years, but if you do the math, it's actually 14 years. Yeah. It was an amendment to the Constitution. It wasn't just like a law that was passed. It was an amendment to the Constitution.
Wow.
And it was the law that sort of enforced this amendment to the Constitution was called the Volstead Act. And there was no end in sight. It wasn't like it was ever going to go away. So lots of trained bartenders, because the heyday, I'm going to backtrack a little bit, the heyday of the American cocktail was the Gilded, coincided with the Gilded era in the United States. So we're talking late 1800s and then up until Prohibition in 1920. And it was, this elevated experience and bartenders who were well trained in creating the cocktail. I mean, they were out of a job, and a lot
14 years, and you went and found something else.
So
it became a lost art.
Correct. Well, a lot of bartenders, some skilled ones, they left the country and they went to London, they went to Paris, they went to Nice, they went to Havana, and so the American cocktail continued on in those places in a way that it did not in the United States.
Interesting.
And so there were really not that many skilled bartenders during Prohibition. So that knowledge didn't get passed down to the next people rising up behind the bar and working behind the bar. And then also people's tastes changed. Like definitely people drank some tasty things during Prohibition. They were able to smuggle it in, or they went abroad and drank. But the high art of the cocktail was gone. And that also meant that a lot of esoteric ingredients weren't coming into the country. Like you're trying to maybe get some, if you had money during Prohibition, you were trying to get some French champagne. That was repeating it. You don't need to say French champagne because champagne is French. But, you might be trying to get some good cognac or get some good Canadian whiskey. But you weren't necessarily so concerned with it being this exquisite cocktail with these ingredients. You just wanted to get your drink on.
Right. Just give me a drink.
And so the things like maraschino liqueur weren't coming into the United States because you're not going to worry about getting maraschino liqueur. You want to get your champagne, or like Italian Amari aren't coming in anymore, or creme de violette aren't coming into the United States anymore. And those things didn't actually come back into the United States until like the 2000s, 2010. Very hard to come by. So you couldn't have these great cocktails because you didn't have the ingredients for it, and you didn't really have the knowledge of it. And then another component as well is that the equipment that's used to make good cocktails that separates ho-hum, throw stuff in a glass from these really polished, considered creations is the cocktail equipment wasn't really around as well either. And that's only started coming into the United States. A lot of it inspired by Japan that held on to the American cocktail when it disappeared from here. And again, that didn't start coming in until the 2000s, like 2010.
Interesting. What is your favorite cocktail?
Oh, of course, when people used to ask me, what's your favorite cheese? You would respond, it's like asking who your favorite child is. But, it depends on what I'm in the mood for. And
four of them. Which one's my favorite?
Yes, right. My favorite cocktail, I tell folks that I like 2 different styles of cocktails, or my go-to cocktails. Bittered and stirred is my go-to. And then the total opposite end of that are tiki cocktails.
When you say tiki, like the umbrella?
Yeah, it's a whole tradition of cocktails that came out of 1930s California, Southern and Northern California. There was
Polynesian flair to it.
yes, right, and that all started very soon after Prohibition in the 1930s, sort of having its heyday in the 1950s. Started in Northern and Southern California, 2 different spots, and then took the country by storm and the world by storm, and they became bastardized mainly in the 1970s with pre-made drink mixes and frozen slushy machines.
Yeah, right.
But they take a tremendous amount of skill to make. I say like symphonies, like you can have a lot of different instruments playing in a room together, but if you don't have them all working together, it sounds like it's a cacophony. But when you have them all, the instruments working together, it's a symphony. So the reason I'm making this analogy is that tiki cocktails usually have a lot of different ingredients. There might be 3 different rums in there, 3 different fruit juices in there, a few different types of sweeteners in there. And to get all those ingredients into a harmonious whole, to create a symphony in a glass, takes a lot of talent. And when it's done well, it's just an exquisite, tasty drink.
If you walked into your favorite mixing place in, let's call it Asbury.
Yeah.
What's the go-to that you're going to order?
I'll usually...
In your favorite place. You don't have to disclose it, but we talked about it.
Well, there's a place in town that I love, their Manhattan. It's just so good.
Just so good.
Yeah.
All right. Now, from a collection standpoint, people collect wine. People have whiskeys and bourbons and stuff like that. What are you seeing in that trend? Is that becoming more and more popular?
Yeah,
or is
it's
it
a
more
world
drinking?
that I don't get into, really, because it's funny. I collect the stuff that I like and I drink it. I don't really hold on to things.
We have trouble holding on to it also.
But one of the co-founder of the Whiskey Club's twin brother,
Got it.
is really into collecting, and it's it's a lot of looking online to see who has what and how to get something at a good price. And once you get into that world of collecting, whatever it is, baseball cards, China figurines, or whatever it is, you just get in it and you get a little obsessed about getting stuff, seeing what's hot. And the world of whiskey is becoming that way. It's good and bad. The good is it shows that in the case of American whiskey, that it's come back. American whiskey died out sort of in the 60s and 70s. And again, only in the last 25 years, 30 years has American whiskey sort of come back, which is great that people are so into it.
What are the top brands in that?
I won't say it's sort of top brands, but because people have their different ones that they like. But the bad side to collecting is that American whiskey used to be a bargain. It was good. It was good stuff.
Right.
And now the prices are going cuckoo.
They are. Kind of like watches and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Were at one point, just there. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you or to join, let's just say the Night Owl Hospitality Club, nightowlhospitality.com.
Yeah, so that is for Night Owl Hospitality. Sort of offers 3 services. We can do cocktail catering of craft cocktails in your home, parties, and office spaces, and then we also teach folks how to make cocktails. So if you ever wanted to know the difference between a stirred cocktail, a shaken cocktail, and a built-in glass cocktail, and the history of those cocktails, we can come and do it. It's really fun for bridal showers and birthday parties. It's my favorite thing to do is show people how to make cocktails.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is I actually lead walking tours in New York City about the birth of the cocktail and about Prohibition. So that's another option we can do. And that you can find all on nightowlhospitality.com. And then the Whiskey Club.
And you also have an Instagram for that too, right?
Yes. It's Night Owl Hospitality.
Okay.
And then for the Whiskey Club, just find us on Instagram, AP Whiskey Club. and send a direct message with your email if you'd like to join our mailing list. We have about, I think you might have mentioned, we have over 300 people on our mailing list, and we meet the final Tuesday of every month in different spots in Asbury Park. And it's really great.
Awesome, Diana. I actually learned a lot, and I really appreciate.
I feel we went on so many tangents that I didn't answer your questions, though.
Well, you answered them at the right spot.
Okay, good.
Because the detail that I was asking is probably not warranted for the podcast, but I'm intrigued with it. And I think at the event that we're doing, I think it would be really interesting to dig a little bit into that in glass version, like to see that. And perhaps we'll do something else that's even more interesting for one of the charity events that are coming up. But like, this is, if you're doing a golf outing, if you're doing an event, you're doing a client event, you're doing a client appreciation event, even if you wanted to do a Zoom event to talk about building a cocktail, you could run that too.
Oh yeah, it's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, because you could actually, the company could send the ingredients to the 20, 30, 50 people that they want, and everybody could be making it and sampling it. Like the curation of fine cocktails, fine wine, fine whiskey, fine bourbon. This is really where, my daughter was just in Dublin for St. Paddy's Day.
Amazing.
Did the Guinness factory.
Right.
Didn't have time to do Jameson. We did Jameson when we were there a few years ago. What a beautiful experience. And the factory tours are just like, you really learn so much about it. But yeah, it is like a Disney World experience. You come out and there's a gift shop and you buy everything, but it's fun. Yeah. It's so much fun. I really want to thank you for sharing your passion for this. And when you talk about it, you could see how you just go off into the tangent and you're thinking about the experiences. And I think where we are from a social perspective, everybody talks about social. Going out to a whiskey club and being with 20, 30 people and experiencing the same smell and the same taste, even though you might taste it differently.
Correct.
You're in the same environment. That is the most unique thing that we could be doing.
Yeah. And to circle back to one of your questions about when did taverns first open.
I love that question.
And, bars have always been more than just about drinking. Because if all we wanted to do was drink, we would just stay home and drink.
Correct.
And so bars are there because they are places for people to come together, experience community, try something that they wouldn't necessarily have at home. They are sort of special places.
Social. Cheers, the show. That was the whole thing about somewhere that you know.
Right.
Like people, common people with common thoughts.
Right.
Yeah, it's so powerful. This was awesome.
Thanks for having me. So fun.
Yeah, I look forward to it. And I think next time that we do this as a follow-up, maybe even at the event, we actually get it recorded of us making it and post it.
That'd be fun.
Be a lot of fun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.